Good afternoon and welcome to this run through of our B2B Buying Decisions 2026 report. I'm assuming at this point that I am broadcasting live on LinkedIn and YouTube. Tried to do Instagram, couldn't get it to work, and also couldn't manage to get it to work going from my personal LinkedIn to my company LinkedIn either. Not quite sure why, but you know what? We're here. So welcome to this run through. If you're watching on the replay, also welcome. Thank you for spending the time to watch this whenever you're watching. So what are we going to cover? I'm not going to keep you very long at all. This is really to talk about the B2B Buying Decisions report that we've produced, and we produced this. We launched it yesterday, and we launched it last year's early. As well. So we're going to sort of make a few comparisons as well as we go. So the format of this session is really quite simple. You're to sit there and listen to me talk through what I think is the interpretation of the report, what the data shows us, what we've interpreted as the key things to take away, with the real aim of you being able to use that information in your business to create better marketing, to understand what your buyers are actually thinking about, what they care about, what they don't care about, and then put that into action. So we're pretty much going to get straight into it, really, I think. If you do want to make any comment whilst you're watching this live or on the replay, all you've got to do is put something in the comments. You know what to do on the platform, whether it's LinkedIn or YouTube. And with a bit of luck, if the technology is right, I'll see what it is you're saying and be able to answer those questions. And if I, for some reason, miss the question or I don't answer your question straight away, I'll have a look, see if we've got any questions coming through at the end on one of the channels to make sure that you've got that there. All right. So let me tell you a little bit about why we do this report. First of all, we're a content marketing consultancy, and what we specialize in is understanding how buyers behave, what their decision process looks like, and then make suggestions on what sort of content you can create to keep them along that journey. We believe that the linear sales funnel is dead, it doesn't exist, it's outdated. And people really, who are buyers, who are human, make decisions based on all sorts of things, including emotion, what their friends say, what experience they've had in the past, and so on. But what we're really trying to get at with this report is first-hand data. Like what do we hear directly, rather than go to a research company or anecdotal stuff? You know, what can we actually find out from it? So that's why we do the report. I'm going to share the report on the screen and we'll just literally go through it. So if you've got a copy, feel free to run through it with me. Otherwise, you can just see what's on the screen as well. All right, so there you go. So you can see this is basically the front cover. I'm going to try and put myself in the picture somehow. I've just got to make sure I press the right button. There we go. So here's the report. What 700 plus buyers told us about how they research, who they trust, and what makes them make those decisions. So let's see if I can get on to the next slide. There we go. You don't need to know who we are at LikeMind. That is, you know, say in the report who we are. I've just explained it. So we've got about 30 pages in this report. What are the key headlines from us? Really, we think the bar has moved. In the second edition of the survey that we've run, we've certainly seen certain shifts in how B2B buyers research, evaluate what it is that they want, and how they decide what to buy. There's some key figures here that I think are interesting and come out through the report. These are your key headlines, really. 89% of buyers trust referrals more than anything else. 57% of people make a purchase decision without speaking to a supplier. What? There's a little bit about AI in here for the first time. And you can see here 54% of people use AI tools regularly. I don't know if that is something that you feel is accurate or not, but that's what our respondents suggested. And 82% of people really are turned off by pushy sales tactics. Now we're going to dive into some of this in more detail as we go. So before we go into some of the key headlines, just a little bit on how we conducted this research. So as I said earlier, we did this research last year in 2025. To be fair, we took the same window of research gathering and data gathering this year as last year. But there was a delay in getting this year's report out. If you know, you know, my fault entirely. So let's have a look. Firstly, what were the objectives? We really wanted to understand how those B2B buying decisions are made. Is it something that people are just doing on their own? If they're not, who is involved in the decision? Who's consulted? How long do these things take? That gives us a sense of what it is that we need to do. Where do buyers actually go? What do they trust? And what drives those decisions as well? Now, for the first time, we are going to explore, or we did explore rather, how people are using AI tools in that decision-making process. how much weight do they give to the answers that they get through AI? What are they using it for? What are they not using it for? Importantly, this is not to do with generative AI and the creation of the content itself. It is really about how they're using it in the decision. And then, as number 5 suggests, we aim to kind of translate this into some practical elements there. So, how did we actually do it? So, in terms of respondents, we had more than last year, so 731 respondents. They are B2B decision makers and influencers. We didn't pull out people who said that they didn't buy for their business. We have assumed that people do buy. There are some differences between the demographic makeup of the people that were involved in this research. So I would say it is more weighted towards UK businesses than 2025's research. That's something that we look at and need to address. It was a bit more balanced. It was still weighted in favour of the UK, but it was a bit more balanced than 90%. 90% is a little bit too high to maybe suggest it's you couldn't really put anything on say this is necessarily appropriate for the US market, but the UK and the US are still reasonably well aligned, so I think it does still apply, and you can certainly take this sample, even though it's UK heavy, into understanding what a US or international audiences buy. We use the same questions, so we didn't remove questions. We wanted to have the same questions in so that we could compare year on year, and we've done that. But we did have 6 new question areas relating to how long things took, what would disqualify a supplier, how far content goes in leading that purchase decision, and then some AI questions and some questions about politics as well, internal politics, which I think is quite interesting to see. In terms of questions we had closed and open questions. And just to say that we did use AI in the research phase. We used it for processing the data. We used it to give us the results of the 731 respondents where that analysis allowed, so in other words, closed questions, or where it was in categories. We did use AI to help us with what's called thematic coding of open-ended responses, so identifying the themes that people were saying, and then we would be able to go and have a look at the individual responses to see what's what. But really importantly, and this is why we actually have an AI use statement in here, is that everything that you see in here in terms of how we interpret the data, the direction that you see, the graphics that you see on the page, the quotations, the findings, they're all us. They're all like mind, including, like I say, these images that are really fantastic and created by our lead creative, Charlie. So we just want to be transparent about how that is. They are our conclusions. All right. Who responded? I'm not really going to go through every single slide here, just because you might as well have the report. But just to say that the amount of really small companies is about the same. They are the people who responded, and the sort of demographics of who responded was pretty similar, with the exception of that skew towards the UK. Slightly more main decision makers this year, and slightly more people who are influential and not deciding. I think that is helpful when we're looking at the who makes decisions, but I don't think you can take anything into that. Categories, sectors represented, kind of the same, slightly more manufacturing and professional services, and slightly less sort of other categories. That might be because when we invited people to respond, we absolutely invited the people who responded last year, so I think they naturally would want to respond to us then as well. Okay, so what did we find? So let's look at the first part, which was authority, really. Authority is a really big thing, and who decides, who makes these decisions. And I want you to have a look at the bar chart on the right-hand side of this slide here, because we've basically seen an increase in people who just aren't delegating. Again, that might be because there's a slight more skew towards smaller businesses. Definitely think that's probably the case. You can see a slight reduction in people who delegate who delegate with the full business case, and a slight decrease of people who delegate and accept the recommendation. Honestly, I have no idea why that would be, apart from the demographic and it's a different set of people perhaps who have responded. Not too much that I think we can read into that, other than to say certainly this year over half the people who made decisions made them on their own. So perhaps we're seeing in not a struggling economy, but where decisions need to be taken, they need to be taken by someone who's got that authority to do it. Now, we did ask questions about internal politics for the first time. We sort of really wanted to find out, look, what are people who are in the business who aren't necessarily directly responsible for the decision, how are they getting involved, and does that slow things up? And basically, what this research tells us is that by and large, if it's a decision that's made in a team situation, so it's a group decision, people are pretty happy with how things are going. People feel pretty much like they can absolutely discuss things with that team. They can get onto the same page. And I think it's quite interesting because I was doing some research the other week for a talk that I'm doing in November about whether or not you should target content towards individual members of that buying team or collectively. And there's some evidence to suggest that if you are selling to a team, or if a team is making a decision, then your content really needs to work on bringing the team together rather than directing a particular target message at an individual. Now, I think that's different, because I was pretty much of the idea that you should absolutely be targeting individuals. But I think what this is suggesting is maybe you need to do a bit of both. Yes, have content that is specifically for a role. So if you're going to target the CFO or the FD, then talk about budget and ROI, but you still need to do something for the whole collective. So get them all on board. What is quite interesting in terms of how people responded to the question of who's causing the hold up here, and where that team is larger, the person who controls the money, whether that's the MD, CEO, or financial person, they are still holding disproportionate sway. So at the end of the day, people are sort of deferring to the person that controls the money as to whether the decision is made. So what do we need to do? We need to make sure that we understand who's on the buying team, who needs to be persuaded, and make sure that we are working on convincing them as part of a team that it's the right decision. So don't ignore those people, basically. Now, we know that decisions are now made faster. This was a big finding of ours, that the speed at which people are making decisions seems to be faster than what it used to be. So we did ask, how long are things taking? And as you can see here, nearly half of decisions are made within 4 weeks. That does not seem very long to me. But if you look at, nearly 3/4 of people evaluate 3 to 5 suppliers. Again, that's not many. And a quarter are only looking at 1 to 2 suppliers. It seems to me as though people want to make decisions quickly. They don't want to open the floodgates to lots and lots of suppliers. They want to pick the people that they think are probably going to be the best option and evaluate those. So the challenge, I think, is how do you then get to be in that shortlist of 1 to 2 suppliers? I think that really has to be something that you have to look at. That might be that you have to work on brand messaging, you have to work on visibility, you have to work on impressions. How do you get yourself in the frame? You've got to be in it to win it, because people aren't spending lots of time searching for who can provide it. And you can see there, if you look at the bar chart at the bottom, that there's not a huge variance between size of business either. It's slightly quicker, perhaps if it's a very, very small company, but people still want to take decisions quickly. So if you're not moving quickly, if you're causing a delay, that's going to be a problem for them. That's something that you need to think about. Now, where are people going for information on who can provide them with the key service or product that they want. And again, we've got a comparison here because we asked this question last year. No surprise, I think that the top answer here is that people go to your website. I continually, for the last 11 years of running LikeMind, have heard that maybe websites, not necessarily old news, but that they're one part of it. 90% of people are visiting the supplier website. So obviously, you must prioritize your website. Now, we'll come on to how you might do that now a little bit later. Look at the read online reviews, though. That is slightly down, but still high. They are reading online reviews to understand whether or not you're any good, what other people say. Search is number 3. Asking for recommendations comes in at 55% for 2026. Case studies, on the other hand, have gone from 60% of people to 36%. So the question is, why is that? They're going for information, they're looking for it, but perhaps they're not necessarily looking at case studies. Now, what we have concluded from looking at why people think that they're not using case studies is that perhaps the case studies aren't doing it for them in the way that they once did. Now, when we look at AI, I will talk to you about how AI is sort of changing how people search for information. We know that AI is reading the case studies. So it's going to read the case study and report them back to the person that's searching for it. And what that means, I think, is that perhaps the way that you write a case study needs to change. Now, we're going to do some additional work on this because I think, for me, this is quite interesting. I love a case study. I like a video testimonial. I like evidence. And again, when we do the work that we do in terms of understanding customer journeys for lots of different companies, evidence is always something that people look at. So how are you providing that evidence? Case study is still a really good way to do that, but the way that you write that might need to change because AI use is increasing. So in the report, we've got some suggestions such as outcome first, multiple formats, writing something in a way that an AI can consume really quickly. So that's something to think about. Second one is we've seen that people are going to review sites more. We've got, review sites and managing where people go online or where your information about your business can be found is a key theme here. And then this one was interesting about content fatigue. I mean, that's probably over-egging the pudding a little bit. But when we look to open responses to like case studies and things like that, there are a number of people that said, look, right, we don't need 20 pages when 5 will do, right? So we don't need War and Peace on a slide deck, on a pitch deck about your company, what it does, your history. We just want to get to the answer. And I think that is to do with the fact that all this information is available online. They're making decisions quickly. They haven't got time to read all of the stuff. They're kind of assuming that you're good at what you do, or you're going to say that you're good at what you do anyway. So case studies, I still think you should do them, but how you should do them, we're going to have a look at that and probably produce something in the future about that. Now, this one is important. What do people actually trust? So if we're saying that they're not reading case studies, then what are they actually trusting? What are they actually seeing that they think, actually, this is really great? And look at that, 89% recommendations and referrals, 55% independent review sites. Okay, so again, they might like what you do, they might like what you say, but they're going to go somewhere else to find out whether or not you can be believed. And there's this idea of, are you perhaps going to need to invest some time in channels that you do not own? So you can put all the effort into your website, that's fine, we've seen that that's important. But what about, if you're a tech company, G2 is your website, Trustpilot, reviews.io, local business to me, Capterra, Google reviews, potentially. People are going to these sites and reading them. What is being said on there? How can you get your existing customers you've got good relationships with to look at and produce some reviews for you. How can you manage that process? As you can see, they are looking at your LinkedIn presence, but they don't seem to be too bothered about things like awards and accreditations. Our sort of anecdotal evidence on this one is if you've got an award, if it's an accreditation because you need it, then it's important that you have it and you talk about it. So we've got Cyber Essentials, right? Great. We've got, Chartered Institute of Marketing, great. These are all sort of tick, 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 but it's not the thing that they're really concerned about. It's, does somebody else say that they're any good? And this is not new, is it? But it's just really interesting to me that this is so high. I think you have to be asking yourself, how are you investing time in managing the recommendations and referrals and reviews process? Something to maybe put on your priority list. All right, we asked, have you ever made a purchase without speaking to a salesperson? Now, I don't want us to get rid of our sales team, so our sales team are really important. But as you can see, the majority of people said that they made a major purchase primarily based on content that they found online without speaking to a salesperson. People are more willing than ever to take a decision based on what they see. So if you don't have the right information for them, the decision is not going to be taken to go with you. Now you'll see a third of people do actually always want a person, so you don't need to sack your sales team yet. But I think you have to look at maybe if you know that your sales team, or you if you're in a sales role, if you convert well when you're speaking to somebody, you need to make sure that that is something that you continue to do because people want it, but also do it in a way that sort of aligns with the fact that people don't want to necessarily speak to people. I mean, the yes frequently being nearly a quarter, I think is quite frightening. So we knew that from last year's survey that people started their buying journey online, but now we're saying that it can also end on it. Have you got all of the information available to them to make the right decision without them having to get in touch with you? Because it's not that they might just not want to. All right, so critical decisions. If there is any decision that they want to make, then we just might need to make sure that that we've got everything in place. So what we're looking at here, you can see this is again a comparison between last year and this year. Does it meet their requirements is the biggest thing that they're looking for. Absolutely. Is it good value for money? Does that, is it worth their time? These are not things that are unusual, of course. And you can see here that the which is rising, which is falling. Having a good online presence does not seem to be as important as it once was. And yet whether it's within budget is also fallen. I think that's an anomaly. I don't think that works with some of our hypotheses, but that's what the evidence says. And we've got some reasoning as to why people think that, just in terms of people want to trust things a bit more. How can they trust you? We've all seen the rise of AI slop and this idea that, can they believe what they see? This trust is now at a premium. So what are the activities that you're doing to make sure that the buyer can trust what it is that you do? Okay, now what gets you eliminated? What gets you thrown out of the sales process? We already know that if a buyer comes to a dead end, they go somewhere else. They're not ringing a salesperson to make the inquiry. So, my view is you've got to have content available for people to look at. 82% of people said that pushy sales tactics is something that disqualifies a supplier. Define what pushy sales tactics is. I think that could be almost like arbitrary. People have different opinions on that, but poor online reviews are really damaging. Slow response times, 45%. I think people forget how important good customer service is and speed of response is to that initial sales process. Unclear pricing information. Again, nearly half of people say if your pricing is unclear, if they can't find it, they're going elsewhere. If the process looks complicated, they're going elsewhere. So there's plenty of things that will put people off, but clearly people want a little bit more time to absorb the information that they find and take a decision so that they can then come to you when they're ready, which is going to be quick. It's not like you're going to have to wait a long time. So we've got a few things on here about what unclear pricing actually is and some recommended actions for you to take. I'm not going to go through all of these, but they are certainly fixable. Have a look at your pricing page or how you articulate how you're pricing. Explain why it's priced a certain way. We do not publish a rate card on our website, but what we will do is we will say, if you're looking for this kind of thing, it sort of ranges between this. That seems to be fine. So make sure your pricing is clear. Now, probably my favorite part of the report is always like, what do people not care about or care less about? So we asked, what do suppliers do that you really don't care about? And again, credentials and accreditations seem to be up there. This idea of awards, nobody cares. I think people do care about an award. And actually, I was having a really interesting conversation with somebody who writes awards entries last week. And we came to the conclusion that people do value awards. It's if you've got a really prestigious award, that can be a positive factor in clinching the deal. If it's sort of best leaf cleaner in the western suburb of Leicester, like it's so niche, it's probably made up. It's got to be prestigious. It's got to mean something. So those are things to concentrate on. We've talked about sales process already. Social media, we know again from last year that people don't really care that much about your social media, but I mean, it is going to depend on who your audience is and what you're selling. And in fact, we know that like social media can be a great way to generate leads and business. Value signaling. Now, this is an important one. It's all about whether or not something's performative. They've got to believe it. People do want to align with values. We recognize that that's a bit of a contradiction, but I think it's about, does it feel performative or does it feel real? So think about how you are articulating those values. Do people want to hear from you? The answer is it depends. So not very helpful. I think given what people have said about wanting to take decisions without a human, there's a tendency to think that maybe they don't want any involvement, but I think it does depend on what it is. So I think it's about how they feel about being contacted. So my suggestion really on this is a review of how you approach your customers in that sales process. Can you make it so that it's less that you're impinging your will on them and more about providing the avenues to ask questions, to come to you for help, advice, that kind of thing. So where does AI sit in this? Well, according to our research, people are definitely using AI more than ever. So you can see that it is embedded in the early stage. So 54% use it either occasionally or regularly. A further 30% use them rarely. So only 16% never use them. Okay, fine. What are they using for? Remember, this is in the buying process, not in things like generating content. So they're looking at it for market research. Well, potentially a problem because we know that these things can hallucinate, but it does mean that you need to be one of the answers. So this idea of like AEO, GEO, how do we make sure that AI supplies you as the answer? That's really important to look at. The problem that they're having, how they can solve that problem, they're asking questions around that. They are getting it to compare the options, so comparing your business with one of your competitors or features of different products. They're definitely doing that. Over half are doing that. drafting requirements or briefs. I mean, I think that's wild, actually. But I suppose it saves a bit of time if they can get an AI to write a brief, so they don't have to do it. And then analyzing the pricing and the value. I think that's hugely dangerous because it's going to rely on the information that you give it. So if you provide inaccurate information, or again, maybe your information is rather opaque on your website or wherever it decides to get it from, that's potentially a problem. What does it mean? I think absolutely you need to be looking at your website and other information that's online, which is, of course, where these AI tools get the data from. Is your information clear? Is it up to date? Can you remove pages that are no longer relevant? Get rid of old products, get rid of old, maybe even old blogs that don't serve it. You do not want an AI serving a blog about something that happened in 2018 when the world is completely different. So that's my takeaway from the AI stuff there. Do they trust it? Now it's a bit more positive. They're happy to use it as a starting point for now. For now. I think it could very easily be the case that in due course, people trust it more and more and more. So we have to look at that. But importantly, and this is the point in the bottom left here, buyers are happy to use AI for their purposes, but they don't like us using it to work on them. So again, that could be the generative stuff that they produce. I don't think it's a contradiction there, but it's an imbalance, isn't it? They're happy to use it on us, but they don't want us using it on them. Now, in the report, we've worked with someone to give us a prompt on how you can check what AI is thinking about your website. I'm not going to go into that. You can download the report and you can copy and paste that. So our conclusions from this report that we've seen is that buyers research more independently, they decide faster, and they trust third parties over you, and they do bring an AI with them. These stats here are just what you've seen before. I don't know what you think to that. It kind of feels right to me from what I've seen in the customer journey work that we do. Certainly the research stuff is absolutely what we see, but the decisions being faster and the third party thing I think is really interesting because it just means that the pace that you've got to go at is speedy. Don't dawdle, don't delay, get on top of your inquiries, your leads. You don't want to waste time when people will sort of go elsewhere. The third party stuff absolutely is something that we're looking at out of interest. Apparently Reddit and LinkedIn are some of the key sources, but I was watching a really interesting video today about how you can just trick AI by creating loads of stuff on Reddit. So, is that useful? I don't know. The key six things that we think that you can do right now: make your pricing easier to find. Look at how quickly you're responding. Do you have the processes in place to respond to things? Look at your case studies. You might need to rewrite them for the AI era. Look at the review sites and the third-party trust situation. How can you get those to be more prominent? Have a look at how AI is looking at your site and make amendments accordingly. And then really just to touch on the sales thing, they don't want pushy sales, so maybe review how you approach that. But don't be too standoffish because people want things to happen more quickly. Okay. I'm not going to go through that. That's all for the key part of the survey. The call to actions are in there. I don't know what you think to that, whether you think that is helpful. Hopefully you do, because it's certainly something that we think is useful. We found it very, very interesting to look at for sure. And it certainly changed our thinking in terms of what we do and also what we're going to do for the clients that we work with as well. So if you want a copy of the report, if you haven't downloaded it already, all you've got to do is go to, he says, there we go, lightmind.media/B2B report. And that's where you can download the report from, so you can read it yourself. Next thing I want to, just before you go, by the way, if you read it and you have other questions, I would absolutely love to hear from you. So I think that's really cool if you are able to do that. But I've got something else which I want to show you, which is that if you download the report, in due course, you are going to get an invite to our Adobe Acrobat PDF space for this report. Now, if you don't know what a PDF space is, it's basically a place online where you can interrogate documents using AI and other things. So I'm going to, if I can work out, maybe if I get the right scene or the wrong scene, we will see. No, I knew it would be the wrong one. There we go. This is a PDF space, and it just allows you to read the report from within this space if you wanted to. So you can see it's exactly the same report here. But you can also interrogate the report itself. So if I just go back to the overview here, I've got some notes on how to use this space that you can have a look at. We've got a summary of the report here. We've put in some word clouds from some of those open question responses that we had. And then if you want to, you can actually ask questions. So I can say something like, how do people view AI in the sales process? I can ask a question using the AI tool here on the right, the AI assistant, and it will now go and interrogate the database, the report. You can see I've already asked it loads of questions here. And I'm never quite sure how long it's going to take, and maybe should have asked something like very specific, like how many people said this or that or whatever. I should have picked my question much better. But in due course, it will provide you with answers so that if you have questions from the data that you see and you want to know what it means, you can just investigate the report using the AI assistant here. Whilst that's building, I'll also point out a couple of other things. So we have the ability, the product itself, PDF Spaces, gives you an audio summary of the report itself. So if you prefer to listen to these things rather than just read, you can listen to a summary or a deep dive into the report. And then the other thing is that as we are receiving questions from people, we are going to update this note in the PDF space to answer the questions that we get. So the questions that you put in the AI assistant, that's for you. We can't see that. But if someone sends us a question, we're going to update the reader's feedback here. So we've had 2 key questions so far. Which AI tool did we use to analyze the data and how did we do it? And what are our views on the internal politics responses? So that's using the PDF space. We will send out a link as part of the download sequence that you get when you download the report, so you can investigate that further. Okay, so that is it. I hope you found that interesting, useful. It's quite a lot of detail in there, but definitely download the report and consume it at your leisure. As I say, ask the AI assistant if you've got any particular questions, or contact us directly at hey@lightmind.media, and we will make sure that the questions get updated in the PDF space. But I hope you find it useful. If you have any specific questions, like I say, ask away. If you would like to learn more about how you can understand what your customers are actually doing, I'd love the opportunity to work with you on something like that. So just get in touch with me and inquire about how we can learn more about your specific customers and how we can produce a marketing strategy that fits their need using all the learnings from this report that we've taken. All right. Thank you for watching, whether you're on the replay or whether you are watching live. I appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you very, very soon. I think that's it. We'll see you. Goodbye.